Okay. Well, hello. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's program. We're going to have an interview with Dr. Erin Cech, and we're going to have a discussion of her book, The Trouble with Passion: How Searching for Fulfillment at Work Fosters Inequality, and a lot of other problems too, but that's the title of the book. Okay, let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Dorothy Manti. I'm the manager of the TLC Center, which is located at the main library. TLC stands for Technology, Literacy, and Careers. The main library reopened about, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago. And many of our branches have reopened. A few of them have not reopened, but you know, they will eventually all open. However, not all the departments at the main library have reopened. For example, TLC did not reopen, and Burton Historical did not, because we are specialty departments, and probably like other libraries around the country and other employers, we're short about 100 people, which is kind of prevents us from opening. You know, you can't open an agency if you don't have anybody to put in it. So as staffing levels improve, and my own thought is as the economy gyrates, because just think of what they were telling us 2 years ago about employment, what they're telling us 6 months ago, what they're told us even this morning. So in other words, I'm ready for surprises. You know, sometimes I say, oh no, forget it, but there could be surprises. So when we get staffed up, the TLC will reopen. And again, we're located at the main library. So now, before I introduce Dr. Cech, I want to say something about the book. Let's see if I can get it in focus. Well, Oh, there, I got to put it near my face. Okay. Now this is the book. Okay. And I ordered 21 copies, and they are available at the main library. Now, a person could walk in and pick one up. I've got them over in the social sciences department. Okay. By the way, that is where I am parked while the TLC is closed. I'm not sitting at home, you know. So I'm over there in the social sciences department, which is right next door to the TLC. Alrighty. And the social sciences department is really the whole south wing of the main library. It's a very, very large department. And social sciences, philosophy, religion, education, business, science, technology, you know, all that good stuff. All right. So that's where the books are. And you could go to DetroitPublicLibrary.org and then look in the upper right-hand corner where it says catalog. And all you need to do is type in Trouble with Passion or the author's name, something like that. Hit enter. They come up in the catalog. You can hit the hold button. Like, let's say that you live out in the area near the Redford branch of the Detroit Public Library. Okay, all right. So you're not able to come down to the main library to get the book? No problem. You just hit that hold button, and then it says, and then of course you got to put in your library card number and your 4-digit PIN. Okay. Then it says, where do you want to pick it up? And then you click on Redford or whatever branch you want to pick it up at. And now when you walk in and just grab the book and check it out, that's, you know, takes a matter of minutes. If you do a hold, it usually takes us about a week because we got to put the book on the truck, get it out to the branch, etc. Sometimes it's 4 or 5 days, depending on, what day. Okay. Now I realize there are people that are, well, like we even had somebody from Florida. Okay. Well, obviously they're not going to have a Detroit Public Library card. All right, no problem. Hey, you go to your public library and you say to the librarian, could you get the book, The Trouble with Passion by Erin Cech? Okay, and let me tell you a little secret. Librarians love to order the books that people want. Really, it just makes it so much easier for us. Now, of course, that goes within certain limits, but I know you get the idea. Okay. And that goes for people who, like, for instance, people from Livonia who don't have Detroit Public Library cards, or people from Novi, or people, our larger suburban community, people from Macomb County, whatever. Okay. So, and then, if push comes to shove, you can always go on to Amazon and get the book. So there's, it's currently published, so it's very available. It's not like something that's gone out of print or something like that. Okay, so now that being said, now that you know how to get the book, I will introduce Dr. Cech. All right. Dr. Cech is Assistant Professor of Sociology at the University of Michigan, and she is on loan from the University of Michigan Engineering Department. Okay. Dr. Cech has a PhD in sociology from the University of California and a BS in sociology from Montana State University. And I see why that would be, that's where your parents are and stuff like that. Yeah. Well, it's nice to be able to pull your feet up to their table while you're going to school. All right. And also a BS in electrical engineering from Montana State. Okay, good. So her research investigates how seemingly benign and taken for granted cultural beliefs reproduce workforce inequalities. Okay. And so, as you might suspect, just from Dr. Cech's little brief bio here, she followed her passion for sociology and switched from engineering to sociology. Now, of course, you can see she went on and, or she did get that degree in engineering. And I imagine there was some negotiation with the parents, because parents sometimes get very upset when people try to change career paths, especially if they're paying the bill. So, all right. So welcome, Dr. Cech. And I'm going to start with, I wrote some questions based on the book, and I'm going to just go from there. So first off, what is passion seeking, or what is the passion principle?
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you for having me. I'm really delighted to be here as part of the Detroit Public Library. I have a special place in my heart for public libraries generally, and the Detroit Public Library specifically. So I'm really glad to be here. So the idea of following your passion is something that has existed for a long time, for decades, my research finds. And it's the idea that the best way to make a career decision, to decide what kind of career you want, what kind of major that you want if you're going to community college or university, is to think about what are the things that inspire me or excite me or align with my sense of self, and make that your passion, or make that passion the way that you make your career decision. So it's centering the thing that you are passionate about in your career decision making. And that's the idea of following your passion. The passion principle is the term that I have coined to talk about this cultural idea that the best way to make a career decision is to follow your passion. Oh, you're muted, Dorothy.
Okay, good. Now, you open your book with the famous Apple CEO Steve Jobs quote from a commencement address he gave, in which he urged the students to find work they loved. In other words, they should follow their passion. And, when Steve Jobs said something, the world does pay attention. And so that kind of, reinserted this idea and reinforced it in our culture. So, Dr. Cech, you want to comment on that a little?
Absolutely. So this was 2005, and Steve Jobs was at the commencement address for their graduating class of Stanford University. And Steve Jobs was well known for expecting intense work devotion from the people who worked under him and with him. He expected long hours. He expected people to put their work above all else in their lives. And he expected people to be on all the time and available for what the company wanted to do. And so to have somebody like Steve Jobs standing up in front of a crowd and saying, the best way to make a career decision is to follow your heart. Don't settle for anything else but something that you love, was a really intriguing moment. Because on the one hand, he was telling people, especially these young adults who were in front of him, who, they had just graduated with their degree and they were going to make their way into the working world, to say, you should find what you love and let that guide your passion, or let that your passion guide your career decision making. And at the same time, he was one of the best capitalists of the last 50 years in terms of his success of business. And so there's a lot of, I think, the sort of assumption generally is that there's some kind of conflict in the business world between following your passion and making money for your company. But what the quote that Steve Jobs highlights is actually, maybe companies are taking advantage of the passion that people walk in with. People who are passionate about their jobs, maybe their companies are taking advantage of that in a way that's not necessarily fair to the people that are working for those companies and are passionate about their work. So I opened the book with this quote because I think it's a really nice example of something that when you stop and think about it and look at it, it actually is kind of jarring or kind of a paradox. And so I wanted to take some time to unpack that paradox through the rest of the book.
Very good. And I think that that's good because that needs to be acknowledged. And yeah, I know you're probably going to say more about the exploitation of, this desire to follow one's passion. And I've seen that too. So this is okay. All right. Now, from your research, and, as I say, you have done a lot of research and present it very understandably in this book. But from your research, which groups tended to rate passion more important than salary and job security considerations in good career decision making?
That's a great question. So let me step back a little bit and provide a little bit of context for the way I went about doing this research. So I did interviews with 100 college students at different universities. So I interviewed students at Stanford, at Montana State University, and at University of Houston. So a pretty sort of wide array of student experiences and demographics. And then I followed up with a group of those people who had graduated after 5 years and saw what they were up to after trying to follow their passion. And then I conducted surveys with workers that had a college degree in the labor force broadly. So this is able to speak to what's going on in the US more broadly than just those specific interviews. And so what I found was that overall, the majority of people across all different demographic groups wanted to prioritize passion seeking or finding something they're interested in or excited about in their work over and above finding job security and salary. And this is especially the case for those with a college degree, but not only exclusively among people with a college degree. So those without a college degree who might have had only some college or a high school degree or less, they often rated finding meaning and passion in their work a little bit about the same or a little bit lower than things like job security and salary. And that's just because to find a decent job in the United States currently without higher education is really challenging. And so for folks who are in that position, they often had to prioritize finding job stability and finding a decent salary, a livable salary, over and above finding meaning. But for those with a college degree, the vast majority said, you know what, if I was going to make a career decision next, I really want to make sure it's something that I'm interested in and that I care about. 67% of college educated workers that I surveyed rated passion above as more important to them than salary and job security. And there was a little bit of variation sociodemographically. So, for example, people who were from wealthy families were a little bit more likely to prioritize finding their passion than people from working class families or maybe who were first generation college students. And I found that people of color, particularly African American, Latinx, and Asian college educated workers were slightly less likely than whites to be interested in pursuing their passion. But across every demographic group that I surveyed, more people prioritize passion than people who didn't prioritize passion.
Well, I guess that's the USA. And okay, good. Now, you presented the story of Andre, the Mexican brick maker. And you can guess he was being paid by the brick. He was not, the manufacturer, the big boss. He was the guy making the bricks. Okay. And so would you like to expand on the story of Andre and the comment made by a white upper class American woman? She said, "Oh, he must really love bricks."
Yeah, absolutely. So this was in 2019, I think, and I was with a small group of people, and we were in rural Baja, Mexico area, and we had stopped to look at a brick making factory and to understand the kind of craft work that goes into actually making bricks by hand. It's something that is becoming less and less common throughout the world, but in Mexico in particular. And we wanted to understand how the brick makers were doing their work and how they laid it out and sort of what precision they used to be able to cut these bricks. And this is intense work. This is work that in the summers is extremely hot, in the winter is extremely cold, and they are literally cutting bricks out of the clay in the earth, and they're outside. And for brick makers like Andres, who we were introduced to when we visited, he was paid by the brick. So he had to make over 600 bricks a day to be able to have any kind of livable wage. And that is just an extraordinary amount of labor to do day in and day out. And somebody that was in the group with me sort of looked at what Andres was doing and made the assessment that, oh, he must really love bricks, meaning that she presumed that the reason that Andres was doing this kind of labor, which was so physically intense, but also emotionally draining because it was so repetitive, was that he must have some emotional connection to the idea of making bricks. And what I argue that this woman was doing was importing this idea of passion seeking onto the experiences of Andres. And Andres very likely had little to no other options available to him. Most brick makers in Mexico have less than a high school education, have very few other kinds of opportunities for jobs that are less physically taxing, less draining. And so to believe that Andres was there doing this brick-making work because he was passionate about it, not only ignored all the kinds of obstacles that Andres might have experienced in getting a better job, but said implicitly that we don't need to do anything about it. That if people are in jobs that are low paying or are manual labor or menial labor because they want to be and because they like it and are passionate about it, then we don't need to do anything to change the system. This is part of a concept that I call choice washing. And choice washing is the idea that we look at inequalities in society and we explain those inequalities as people just making choices in their lives in an otherwise equal sort of meritocratically functioning system. So the way this would work in the United States, for example, is to look at gender segregation in the labor force. So if we look at sort of teachers versus engineers, we know that teaching, women are overrepresented, but in engineering, men are overrepresented. And there's a lot of reasons behind that have to do with historical and contemporary issues of stereotyping and the way that we encourage boys and girls differently in school and different kinds of things that lead to that. But somebody who has a choice washing perspective would look at that difference by gender and say, oh, well, that's just men and women following their passion into different fields. And so we don't need to do anything about that. We don't need to try and address the biases or the issues that are embedded in education because it's just about their choice. And so I talk about how that's a really, that the idea of choice washing coupled with the passion principle is a really powerful mechanism for explaining away all kinds of inequalities in the labor market.
And that is how it reinforces the socioeconomic status. Very good. All right. By the way, that term choice washing, I thought, wow, a new word. I've never seen that before. So I Googled it and a couple things came up, including you. But the other thing that came up, you're going to love this. And I'm sure you know this already, but I want, other people to know this. Apparently in these car washes, when you drive through the car wash, they have the brushes and the sponges and the things and it washes. Okay. There is a piece of equipment, a product, a piece of, machinery that they sell to these commercial car washes. And I've seen that term choice wash there. So now I'm going to ask you a question, Dr. Cech. Did you make that word up?
I did. Yep, that's my term. Yes.
Wow. Yes. I mean, how many of us in this life make up a word? So good for you. Yeah. I didn't bother looking at in the OED, the English Oxford Dictionary. I didn't even bother with that. Okay. All right. Okay. So that is an example of how the passion principle combined with choice washing. And the definition that I reduce that to is choice washing is, well, since it's your own individual choice, it's your own fault. So yes, don't complain. Yep. Yeah. All righty. So now, that being said, can an individual's passion-driven hard work usually be guaranteed to overcome these structural inequalities that exist in society today? In other words, if you work hard, can you beat the system?
I would love the answer to that to be yes. And the idea of the American dream is the very idea that you articulated, that as long as we work hard and put in enough effort that we can achieve anything. That's what it means to exist in the United States, to be part of the American dream. But there's more than 2 centuries of research that says that the United States is not fair, not egalitarian and meritocratic, particularly the labor market. And so there's already inequalities baked into the system. But when it comes to passion seeking in particular, there is this sense, sort of part of the idea of the passion principle is that passion will lead you to put in the drive that you need to succeed. And so as long as you are passionate, you can achieve anything because passion will drive the hard work. But that is not what I find in my research. So I find that that can be the case most often for people from wealthier families. And there's a couple of reasons that this can be the case. So people from wealthy families have what I call springboards and safety nets available to them to help take what they're passionate about and launch that into work that's stable and decently paying. So springboards are things like the social connections that your parents might have by knowing somebody in their church group or knowing somebody through their own profession that can introduce you into that network and say, hey, my kid Jamie is really interested in public health and you're in public health. Maybe she can do an internship with you, or maybe you can sort of talk to her about the kind of work that you do. And it gives them a leg up in a way that people who come from families who don't have those kinds of connections and opportunities just don't have access to that at all. Things like safety nets are the financial support that people from wealthy families often have access to. This is things that seem obvious, like parents who can pay their student loans or allow them to sort of not have to work when they're in school, like many of us did. And also to help support them if they take an unpaid internships. Unpaid internships are such a problem for so many people who are trying to follow their passion in fields that are in the creative arts or in places like journalism where there are many unpaid internships. So people who have from wealthy families often have safety nets that will help. Their parents will help them pay for their rent and food while they take these unpaid internships, where people who don't have that can't take those unpaid internships because they have to work and get money to pay for their student loans and things. But it's also that when people graduate with a degree in their passion, it sometimes can take weeks or months or maybe even years for them to find a job that aligns with their passion. And so people who have these kinds of safety nets from their families can, as many people said, wait it out. So just take, volunteer or take part-time jobs or not work at all and keep looking for jobs that are aligned with their passion. And then once they find them, then they can apply. So there's all kinds of ways in which people who are trying to follow their passion but don't have these kinds of safety nets and springboards end up in really precarious positions. So one of the stories I tell is of somebody that I call Thomas, and it's not his real name. I call him Thomas to protect his identity. But Thomas was a student who graduated with a degree in music, and he was from the Minneapolis area originally. And after he got his music degree, went back to Minneapolis to try and start a music lessons business. That was his passion. He was really excited about that. And after college, he was pretty successful in getting some contracts, getting some people to take part in student loan business, but he couldn't get on top of his student loan payments fast enough, and ended up having to leave his new business behind and ended up working in a UPS warehouse, making minimum wage. And he still, at the time of talking to him 2 years after graduating, had over $60,000 in student loan debt. Yeah. So not only did he have a tremendous amount of student loan debt, he wasn't working in work that was aligned with his passion, and he was working in temporary work that wasn't particularly stable. And so that was much more common just in students who didn't have that kind of help from their parents than students who did. And that has nothing to do with how hard Thomas worked. Thomas worked extraordinarily hard. He worked 100 hours a week to try and get these kinds of contracts to get his music lessons business going, and he just couldn't get on top of his student loan debt.
Yeah. I love your use of the springboards and safety net concepts. And that is so true. And in the Career Center and TLC, we would see that all the time, starting with, like, as you mentioned, the business of who has the parent who knows the right person so that the kid gets the internship. And then the whole issue now, it didn't used to be this way, but in the last 6, 7, 8 years, the unpaid internship, especially in things like journalism. Oh, I have a feeling somebody's taken advantage of somebody here. Okay, all right. I think you've really covered that beautifully. So let me kind of move on a little. Now, school children are typically sent to the library with career choice assignments. And here is how this often goes. The parent walks up and says, now tell Miss Manty what career you want. And the kid looks at you with their beautiful innocence and sweetness and says, I want to be a ballet dancer or an actress or a butterfly, things which probably have limited employment possibilities. All right. So the parent who's standing behind the kid is wildly gesticulating to me, no, no, and of course, and they're mouthing lawyer, engineer, the idea. And one time I even had one parent who came in prepared for this. She held up a sign, and on the sign was written lawyer.
Oh my.
So apparently she was prepared. So now this is kind of a little tricky situation. So, I mean, parents want the best for their kids, and that's a good thing. But do you have any advice for parents as it relates to career choice and passion seeking? So now I don't expect you to solve this, but your thoughts on the matter. What do you think?
Yeah, and parents are in a tricky situation, just as career coaches and counselors are, just as people who are trying to make these decisions about their lives are. These are weighty decisions, and they matter a lot for how we live our lives in the short term and long term. So I certainly don't want to minimize the challenge of trying to understand this pathway. But what I would say, so I'll say a little bit about career decision making generally, and then talk more specifically about the sort of intakes and the quizzes that people take about and what that means and the kind of difficulties around those instruments in particular. So the question about what a young person should do, regardless of sort of what age they are, is really a question about where they are going, where they want to locate themselves in the paid workforce, and what relationship they want the paid workforce to have to the rest of their lives. And the idea of following your passion is taking one sense of self and saying, I want to build my place in the labor force around my sense of self. But there's all kinds of other ways we can build our relationship to paid work around. So one of those might be, I want to make decent money so that I can support my family. One of those might be, I want to work in a job where I can work as few hours as I can and still be able to support myself so that I can do things that I love outside of work. Or I want work that's really predictable so that I don't have to be looking at my phone at all times and be wondering if my boss is trying to get in touch with me. I want to go to work, and then I want to leave and have my time. Or maybe I want to work for an organization that I really believe in, even if I don't necessarily have passion for the particular tasks I'm doing day to day. Maybe I really love the goals of the organization, and so that's the way that I should think about making career decisions. So overall, I think we all need to take a much more holistic approach to thinking about what good career decision making means. And that is really complicated. In the same way that making a decision about, well, whether do I move to Detroit or Chicago? Do I marry this person or not? How do I structure other big decisions in our lives? Have all different kinds of narratives that we can tap into about what's a good decision and what's a right decision. So just like those things, I think there's all kinds of decisions that we are all kinds of pieces of advice and things we should weigh against one another when we think about making decisions in our own lives, as well as when people in our lives, kids or nieces and nephews and people we're mentoring, when they're trying to make decisions about their lives too. And with regard to the career choice quizzes or intake assessments, those I make me very concerned for a couple of reasons. So the way that those things tend to be structured is, if you've taken them before, this probably sounds familiar to you, but you have a set of questions and you are asked how you feel about those things. And they're often, do you like this thing? Do you like this particular situation? Do you like this thing more than that thing? But what those assessments do are actually concretize the idea of passion seeking, and then from that spit out a set of jobs that seem to align with your interests and values. In other words, it guides people toward jobs that they are passionate about, without often asking questions about how financially risky are you? How important is it to you to make a particular level of financial security? How important is time off to you, right? All those other kinds of considerations I just talked about, and really just take the idea of matching one's sense of self with the job, and then sort of churning it through this sort of computer algorithm and producing this list of jobs. Here's a set of problems with that. Number one, if it's produced by a computer algorithm, people are more likely to believe that it's true, that there is some kind of truth that comes out of that, right? That this, I took this quiz and it told me I should be that. Well, maybe I should be that, right? And the other problem is the things that people find interesting or exciting are gendered and racialized and classed in particular ways, because of the way that we encourage young kids to be interested in things, or young kids had to have opportunities to explore things. So for example, computer coding. Computer coding is one of those things that might be asked about within that assessment. And maybe somebody is asked, do you like computer programming? But if you have never had the opportunity to do computer programming, then that means that you probably will say, well, you don't like it because you haven't had the opportunity to. But who has an opportunity to, or more likely to be middle class and upper class white boys? And so that means that when these exams are these tests are calculated and the set of occupations is spit out of them, it actually has biases that have been roped into them, into the answers that are given already. And it can lead to greater segregation in the occupations that people choose by things like gender and race than it might otherwise.
I'm so glad you brought up how the career interest inventories, we'll just call them that for lack of a better term. Yeah. And one positive thing that I have seen is a better understanding of the academic community as to the utility of these. So I have seen somewhat of a decrease. However, there are still a number of the colleges, community colleges, universities, who make this a requirement for incoming students. And yeah, this whole interest, I know the one I took said I should be I should work in a florist shop. Okay, well, I don't know how related to library work that is, but whatever, So, and I think people have developed the ability to laugh about that, but then sometimes their parents, being of an older generation, want to believe, well, the computer said this must be true. And I'm glad you use that example of computer coding. That is the perfect example. That is the perfect example. Yeah. And then the other part that really muddies the water here is there are commercial organizations who are peddling high price, we'll call them learning opportunities, the kind that lead nowhere other than maybe a big bill. Yeah. And they will often give a test that an idiot could pass. And they say, oh, career for you. Well, that's neither here nor there. Okay. Now, let's see then. Well, so all being said and done about the role and viability of passion seeking, maybe this is an unfair question. This is the meaning of life question. How does one find meaning and purpose in one's life? I realize, that's a little bit, but go ahead, take a shot
well,
at it.
I'll give a little bit of history actually about sort of the origin of this question before I attempt to answer it. So, the idea that we should have a meaning and purpose in our life is actually pretty recent historically. So the idea that we are individuals and we have our own individual pathway and we have a narrative about our lives that we will be able to tell at the end of our lives whenever that comes is actually something that is only about 150 years old. So prior to that, people didn't typically think of themselves as individuals in that way. The idea was you were part of a community or you were part of a family, you were part of sort of a religious group or something like that. And as we have moved into modernity and post-modernity, the idea of the individual becoming what's called the master human identity has really taken off. And so people didn't worry about what their life stories were and how to tell those life stories at a cocktail party, in centuries past. And so this is a fairly new kind of social development, and it's not universal. There are countries where the idea of being sat down and asked, what is your life story? And that everybody has the opportunity to write their own bibliography feels really sort of distant, feels really foreign. So, I want to kind of couch that question to say that the very idea of finding meaning and the need to feel like we need to find meaning in our lives is something that is a social construct, is something that's part of the construction of the history and structure of our society. That being said, there is a strong need for people, especially in the United States, to feel like they have this self that they are developing. So in the literature, they call it the reflexive project of the self, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's a sentiment that I want to have a sense of who I am, and I want to continue to develop that sense of who I am. And my purpose in life is tightly connected to who I think I am and who I want to be. And in 50 years ago, there were more opportunities for us to find that sense of meaning and that sense of self in other places. So there were more robust community engagement opportunities. There were more robust engagement with religious institutions. Families were a little bit more close sort of geographically. And so there was a sense of purpose and a sense of identity that existed at that time that today, because of the reduction in those kinds of community-based organizations and sort of the secularization of the United States, we don't have the same kind of opportunities to find our meaning, to find our purpose, and to pursue that meaning and purpose. One of the places that's left, and one of the places that invites and in fact sometimes demands for us to make it our meaning and our life's work, is our paid employment. And so here sits the labor force saying, please, yes, come and work for my organizations and make this the place that you find meaning. Because if you find meaning there, you likely work harder at it. You likely do more than what you're asked to, than what you're paid to do. And it's beneficial to the organization. And so from that perspective, I don't want people to go to work and be miserable. That's not my message at all. Doing work that feels drudgerous, that is difficult, that is exhausting, that is draining, that is physically difficult, is not enjoyable for anybody. But that said, there are many ways that we can go to work and have a decent time, but not put our entire sense of identity in that work. And so what I think the solution is, especially for people who are passionate about the work that they do or want to move into something that they're passionate about, is to, as I discuss in the book, diversify your meaning making portfolio. And so what I mean by that is to identify places outside of your work that you're passionate about, that you're excited about, that have nothing to do with the job that you do, and make time in your schedule for those kinds of activities and for those events. And for people who have really busy lives and busy schedules, it actually can be really hard to elbow in room in your schedule to do things that you're passionate about outside of work. But it's so important. And it's so important because the labor force isn't designed to support us in our sense of self-fulfillment and in our life's goal, right? It was designed to get the work out of us to be able to support what the organization or the company wants to do with the work that we provide. And so the organizations often don't have a whole lot of loyalty to us. So in the instance that we get fired or let go, or we don't get the promotion that we're expecting, that can not only feel like a loss of income and a loss of job, it can feel like a loss of a sense of self, a sense of self-purpose. And that's really risky existentially. And so that's why I say it's really important to find those places outside of work where you can have meaning and self-fulfillment.
That is, that is just such good advice. That is so wonderful. So, I guess if you want to know something, ask a sociologist. Yeah. And Dr. Cech, I am so glad you followed your passion. I'm sure you would have been a fine engineer, and and I'm sure it's very useful. But I think you've made a real contribution to clarifying, amplifying, picking up, and doing research on something that's really very important. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that concludes our presentation. And I want to thank Dr. Cech, and I want to thank all the people who attended. And I guess that's it. So we will say goodbye.
Dorothy,
and yes, all right then.
Has their hand raised.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Can you get that, Kalena?
Well, I think it might have been a little clappy hand, maybe not a raised hand, but I don't know.
Okay. All right, then we will conclude. So thank you one and all.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, then.